The Battle of Stalingrad is remembered as the deadliest and most brutal single battle in human history, with casualties that exceeded those of many entire wars. Yet numbers alone cannot convey the scale of suffering. Only when the story is reduced to the personal level, describing the way it actually unfolded, do we grasp how humanity itself seemed to vanish. From merciless slaughter to atrocities and even to cannibalism, the breaking point of civilization was reached. When the battle finally ended, 99% of the city had been annihilated, and out of more than 500,000 inhabitants, barely 1,500 were left alive among the ruins. So let's set the stage with the course of the battle itself, so you can understand the horrific conditions that gave rise to such suffering. A city pulled into the fire in the summer of 1942. Hitler launched Operation Blue, a massive German offensive into southern Russia aimed at seizing the oil-rich Caucasus and capturing Stalingrad on the Volga River. Taking the city would secure Germany's flank and, as a symbolic bonus, strike a blow at the Soviet Union by seizing the city bearing Stalin's name. Army Group South was divided into two thrusts, one for the oil fields, the other for Stalingrad. It was a decision that would doom the German Sixth Army. On the Soviet side, the importance of Stalingrad was clear. Stalin himself issued the infamous order No. 227, not one step back. Unauthorized retreat was strictly forbidden, and blocking detachments were placed behind the lines with orders to shoot deserters. This rigid setup ensured the coming fight would be savaged out by late August 1942. General Friedrich Paulus's 6th Army and General Hermann Hoth's 4th Panzer Army reached the city's outskirts. The civilian population had little time to evacuate, and tens of thousands were mobilized to dig trenches and build defenses. On August 23, 1942, the firestorm began. Relentless Luftwaffe bombing raids reduced vast portions of the city to rubble, killing staggering numbers of civilians and soldiers. On that very first day, Stalingrad was already in flames. Then came the tanks. As German armor pushed into the northern suburbs, they met something unthinkable. Teenage girls manning anti-aircraft guns, firing at advancing tanks and reportedly knocking out more than 80 before being overrun. Shocked Germans pressed deeper, fighting isolated strongholds of resistance. By early September, German forces had reached the Volga, north of the city, splitting Soviet defenses. Red Army reinforcements rushed across the river to hold the line dot by November. The Germans controlled 90% of Stalingrad, and the Soviets clung to two small enclaves on the riverbank. Exhaustion was everywhere, but this was only the beginning. The Soviets were preparing a counterstrike that would turn the entire battle upside down. Surrounded on all sides, what the Germans didn't know was that the Red Army had been massing fresh forces on the flanks of the city. On November 19th, Operation Uranus was unleashed. Romania, Italy, and Hungary held Germany's flanks, but poorly equipped and demoralized. They were smashed aside by waves of T-34 tanks and infantry. In just 4 days, Soviet pincers met west of Stalingrad, encircling the entire 6th Army and elements of the 4th Panzer Army. Nearly 300,000 Axis troops were trapped. Panic gripped German high command. Paulus begged to break out while the chance remained, but Hitler personally forbade retreat. He ordered the army to dig in and promised that the Luftwaffe would resupply them by air. It was impossible. Hundreds of tons were needed each day. Only a fraction arrived. Food, ammunition, and winter clothing vanished almost overnight. The nightmare was only beginning. Fighting room by room, the battle inside the city was unlike any other. The Germans themselves called it Rattenkrieg, the Rat War. Soldiers fought house to house, room to room, floor to floor. One side would seize a building, lose it in a counterattack, retake it again, and lose it once more, each exchange costing horrifying casualties. The Central Railway Station alone changed hands 13 times in one day. The combat was so close that Soviets used the tactic of hugging the Germans, staying so near that artillery and aircraft could not be used without hitting their own men. Multi-story buildings became vertical battlefields, Germans on one floor, Soviets below, more Germans beneath them still. Sewers, rubble, and collapsed buildings became tunnels of death. Small squads raided at night, armed with knives, bayonets, grenades, submachine guns, and flamethrowers. The Soviet PPSH-41 shown here, spraying bullets in the confined rooms, and both sides used it. Tunnels were dug and packed with explosives to blow up German strongholds. Mines, booby traps, ambushes, and snipers made every step lethal. Vasily Zaitsev, the famous Soviet sniper, tallied more than 200 kills and engaged in legendary sniper duels. Winter, hunger, and desperation. Then came the cold. By December, temperatures dropped to -30 degrees Celsius. Already malnourished, poorly clothed, and battered, German soldiers froze to death in droves. Frostbite and hunger became worse enemies than Soviet bullets. Bread rations shrank from 300 grams to 100, about 2 slices, and even that was sawdust-laced. Horses were eaten, then dogs, then rats. Belts and leather were boiled for food. And when nothing else remained, soldiers turned to the only supply that never ran out, the dead. Diaries speak of men becoming animals. Medical supplies vanished. Wounds meant slow death. Typhus raged. Surgeries were done without anesthesia. The army was at its breaking point. Still, Hitler's orders forbade surrender, reminding Paulus that no German field marshal had ever been captured alive. Civilians suffered as well. Tens of thousands who hadn't evacuated now endured the same nightmare: bombings, hunger, atrocities, and exposure. Women shaved their heads to disguise themselves. From soldiers, going out for food or water often meant death. About 40,000 perished in the fighting. Meanwhile, Field Marshal Manstein's relief attempt drove within 30 miles of Stalingrad, but was stopped by unyielding Soviet counterattacks. Inside, the Germans abandoned their last airstrip. Supplies dwindled to nothing. By January 1943, the Sixth Army was finished. The collapse and what came after Soviet Operation Ring tore the pocket apart. From 300,000 men, barely 90,000 remained, starving and freezing. Many surrendered, though often they were killed outright. On January 31st, Paulus finally broke Hitler's order and surrendered his starving troops. Hitler raged. Paulus became the first German field marshal captured alive. The once invincible Sixth Army was destroyed. Soviet soldiers were stunned by the sight of skeletal, frostbitten Germans in rags. But hatred ran deep, and their ordeal was not over. The prisoners were forced to march across the frozen steppe. Thousands collapsed from exhaustion and cold, shot where they fell. Of 91,000 taken prisoner, only about 5,000 survived to return home, and some did not come back until 1,956, 11 years after the war ended. Forced into labor camps, factories, and mines, they perished rebuilding the very nation they had tried to destroy. Stalingrad was the first great defeat of the German army and the turning point of the entire war. Afterward, the Wehrmacht was forced into retreat all the way back to Berlin. The Battle of Stalingrad ended long ago, but its shadow remains one of history's darkest testaments to human suffering.